everyone. So today I'm going to go over the tutorial to make this neck warmer. This tutorial can be used to make any neck warmer, any size, with any type of yarn. But I used this yarn, which is a Chilean yarn called, the make is Rellinela, and the type is jacquard. It is an acrylic yarn, very easy to wash, and I really like it because it has a dye that has solid colors and mixes. So when it knits up really nicely. In this one, I only used the part with 2 colors. I've used this before for some of Max's sweaters, and you will see them in the following picture. All right, so the way that we're gonna construct this is very simple. We're gonna use a long tail cast on. The key is that it's a very loose long tail cast on. If you knit very tight, you might want to use the German cast on or something that is more stretchy. But I use a regular long tail cast on in a very loose manner. Then you're going to do a 1x1 rib, and you're going to knit as high as you want. In this case, it's a little less than 4 inches or 10 centimeters. That first section is followed by an all purl row, and I'll tell you why in a second. Followed by a section of 1x1 rib, and lastly, a stretchy bind off. So it's very easy. I used 4.5 millimeter double pointed needles or US 7 double pointed needles. Of course, you can use circular needles with a magic ring. Or you can simply knit this flat and add a seam to it. But I like to use double pointed needles because I don't have to add a seam, and all I need to do is weave a tail end from the cast on and one from the bind off. Why do I have this line here in purl row? Very simple. Max uses this neck warmer doubled, folded like this. It's super thick. It's very nice for him, and it works for him because he is a very mobile little boy and he doesn't like to wear a lot of layers. So I make sure to keep him warm with this. He can also use it unfolded in replacement of a beanie. He doesn't use it this way very much, but you can also use it like that. So here we go. Let's start. So the first thing we're gonna do is cast on our gauge, our swatch, yeah, to be able to calculate how many stitches we're gonna need to make the actual neck warmer. And as I said, I use a regular long tail cast on. I don't need the tail to be very long. All right. So what you're gonna do now is knit up in the stitch that you're going to use, which is 1x1 rib. All right, guys, so I ended up changing the color of the yarn because I didn't have enough for how much I wanted to knit for the swatch. So you don't have to knit a whole bunch. You don't have to knit, that much for the swatch, because what's important is your cast on, how loose the cast on is and how that is going to fit over the head, because this is going to be the tightest part, most likely, of your neck warmer. All right, so this is what we're measuring. This is what's important to gauge how many stitches you're going to need. So as I said, I use the long tail cast on, but by now I have been able to learn how to make it as loose as possible. If that's not the case for you, I would say practice it a little bit. Use larger needles, for example. Use a different type of cast on method, a stretchier one like the German one, for example, whatever works for you. And now what we're going to do is we're going to measure it. I forgot my measuring tape, but I have this other one, so bear with me. And what we're going to do is we're going to stretch our sample and measure it. So this is a good stretch. I could stretch it a lot more. That's up to you. If you want a very snug fit around the neck, then stretch it more because you'll use fewer stitches for that neck warmer. But if you don't need such a snug fit, just loosely stretch it. Up to you, but I don't stretch it that much. So I'm getting 9 inches or 23-ish centimeters. And now we'll calculate. Our swatch has 30 stitches in 9 inches or 20 3 centimeters. Now what you're going to do, the next step that you're going to take is measure the circumference of the head of the person that you're knitting this for. In my case, I knit it for Max, who has a circumference of 52 inches. No, that would be a very big head. No. He has a circumference of 20.5 inches, which is the same as 52 centimeters. If you get a measurement like this, it's up to you. You can use it as is, or you can round up or round down. Doesn't really matter. I'll round it up, so I'm going to say 21 inches. Now we're going to use these numbers to calculate how many stitches you need to cast on this. So we can say that we have 30 stitches in 9 inches, and we want to find out how many stitches we need for 21 inches. If we're doing it in centimeters, we'll say we have 30 stitches for 23 centimeters, and we want to know how many stitches we need for 52 centimeters. So now we'll do the actual math. We're going to multiply this diagonally. So 21 inches times 30 stitches is 630, divided by 9, 70 stitches. So we're going to cast on 70 stitches. Remember that we rounded up. Yeah, so we can also use the 20.5 to make it more accurate. It would probably give us 68 stitches. I'll write it down here. Sorry, I'm coming out of a cold. So let's say 68 stitches if we use or so. I haven't used the number, but it will probably come to something like this, or a number that you'll have to round up or round down. If you get a number that needs to be rounded up or rounded down, remember that in order to do a rib knit, you need an even number. So you will have to choose whether to round up or round down. And that is something that you just kind of eyeball it. It's just one stitch, so it's not going to change things that much, but you still have to make the decision. If we're doing it in centimeters, we're going to say 52 times 30, right? We're doing it diagonally, which is 1,560, and we're going to divide that by 23, which gives us 67 and some change, right? And in this case, we do have to round up, so we'll round up to 68, which is pretty much the number that we had if we had used the original 20.5 inches instead of the rounded up one. Now, we can say, you know, we want to round it up or down. It doesn't matter. I already know that I stretched this, not that I didn't stretch this to the max. So I can get away with the smaller number. It'll go through Max's head, right? Because I know that this many stitches will fit Max's head. So I could do even less, even fewer numbers if I wanted to, even fewer stitches, but I'm going to do 68, yes, for the sake of this tutorial. So these numbers will be different depending on your swatch and the head size of the person that you're making this for. And of course the needles you use, etc., etc. But this is the math. Now, what we need to do now is cast on our 68 and take it from there. All right, so now we're gonna cast on for our project, and we're gonna calculate how many stitches we need. Honestly, I usually just kind of eyeball it, and if it works halfway, I already know or I don't know. But some people, somebody told me once to grab 2 needles and go around as many times as you need stitches, so 68. But I've never tried this. I'm just telling you it's an option. I'm sure that there's other ways of doing this. I grab the yarn with my thumb and the working piece with my index finger, and then grab the rest. And I don't really do a slip knot or a twist. I just kind of grab it and then go into this space here created in the thumb from the bottom up. So bottom up on the thumb. Then I go around the needle with my index finger, and then I go top down or up bottom in the same thumb space. And then I think this is the key part. I just tighten as long as my thumb allows it. I don't do more. I don't make it more snug than that. And that gives me wiggle room later on to make it more stretchy. So I'll do it again. Bottom up through the thumb, around with the index, and then up bottom through the thumb again. And as long as my thumb allows it. So bottom up, around, up, bottom, and like that. As you can see, not making it super snug creates a lot of space, and that's what's gonna allow me to have a looser tension. And I'm gonna do this all the way up to 68. The reason why I'm not very strict about the way that I cast on is because I kind of calculate it halfway, and if I can tell that it's not going to be enough, I just change the direction of the working yarn. And so I continue knitting the other way around. This was my working yarn before. The working yarn is the yarn that shortens quicker. But if you switch it, then you have the yarn ball yarn become your working yarn, and you have more yarn to work with. So I think that's why I become complacent and don't calculate it better. And then you can see it, but once it's on, nobody can tell. So that's how I get away with it. Okay, now that I've got 34, so I'm at about half, and I still have 34 to go, I'm going to use the next needle. These are not very long. I think they're 6 or 7 inches. Some double pointed needles are longer, and you can just put one of these stoppers at the end and do all the needles, all the stitches you need, and then transfer them to the other needles. But I just like to keep going with the next needle. So I've got 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. Now we're ready to start knitting. And there's 2 things that you want to make sure you do. One is to make sure that this is all straight, so that when you start knitting, you know, that your stitches aren't twisted, so that when you start knitting, you get an actual tube and not something else. And the other thing is, a lot of people don't like double pointed needles because they get loose stitches in these areas, in the vertexes. But that can be easily fixed if you are constantly moving your knitting. So I'll show you. Instead of starting here with a new needle, what I do is start with the needle I already have. So knit, purl, and so on. And I do a few stitches. I did 4 stitches, and then I introduce my 5th needle. So I'm going to do knit, purl, and I'm going to go all the way to the end of the next needle. So knit, purl, and once I get to the end, what I do is I continue as many as I did at the beginning. I continue. So I'm going to do 1 and knit, 2, purl, 3, knit, 4, and now I get the 5th needle. So basically I'm always moving this a little bit, and I find that that helps hide any gaps that I might have in my tension and any gaps that may happen in the knitting. But for a project like this, because it's round and it goes over the head and the force in it is always the same and in the same direction, I find that it doesn't matter, and that it'll eventually even out even if you don't block it. So what you're going to do is you're going to continue knitting as high up as you want, and then we will see each other again. All right, so once you have knitted as much as you want in height, you're going to do 1 purl row. Make sure you start in the right place and start your purl row. The reason why you're doing a purl row, obviously you don't have to do it, but the reason why we're doing it is so that when you fold the neck warmer, it folds easily and it stays. Without that crease, it'll be much more rounded and it won't stay. So that's the only reason why we're doing it. If you don't like it, obviously keep doing what you've been doing until now. All right, and then once you are done with that purl row, you're going to continue with the 1x1 rib, starting with a knit. Make sure it's the exact same. The stitches are the exact same as they were before you did your purl row, and continue for the same amount of rows that you've done for the first half. Whoops. Pay attention in this row because it's easy to make that mistake that I just made. All right, so once you've knitted your second part, it should match the first in length. You are going to bind off. The bind off, just like you would do the cast on, you want to make sure that it's nice and loose because it needs to match the tension of the cast on. So take your time so that you don't tighten it, and make sure that it's nice and loose. Again, when I do this, I don't tighten anything. I don't make anything taut. I just keep going and try to give as much yarn into the fabric as I can. Now you're going to go all the way around and then weave your ends. Of course, you can always do a stretchy bind off, but for me at least, I have found that this is the best option, that if I do a stretchy bind off, it just becomes way too loose and wavy, and I don't like that. So I just do a regular bind off, nice and loose. Once we'll see how this one turns out, but sometimes it is a little bit wavy, it looks a little wonky. Don't worry about that. Once you start wearing it, or the person you're giving it to starts wearing it, things tend to settle. I haven't even blocked Max's neck warmers because they're acrylic, and I feel like acrylic doesn't really need to be blocked as much, especially not for a neck warmer. So it is a little wide, but it's fine. That's what it looks like. Now what we'll do is weave in our ends. Right, so to weave in the ends, what I do is, well, I use a very thick needle. I like to use them thick with not a lot of points so I don't go through the yarn as easily. And I grab what's left of the yarn and go through the first stitch, imitating these V's that are at the top of the bind off. So I go into that first stitch and then back into the last one. And I tighten it so that it mimics the tension in the rest of the piece. Then I'll go to the back. This is the right side of the fabric. So I'm gonna go towards the inner part, and I'm just going to follow. You can do this however you want. Maybe you want to weave in horizontally, but I just like to follow it vertically and weave it in like that. Just pull through. Again, nice and loose. Don't make anything tight. If you need to, you can always pull it back so it hides really nicely, and then just clip the end. Do the same with the other end. This is the cast on, so I'm going to do something similar. Here it's not so easily, the first stitch isn't that easy to see, but I like to just kind of close the gap very, very loosely. Remember, it has to go through a big old head, as I tell Max. Close it loosely, and then just weave in that end however you see fit. For sweaters, for some reason, I do it differently, but for this, I don't think it needs to be very fancy. Pull it through, nice and loose. Check that the tension is okay, and then clip the end. Sorry, these are my bad scissors. The other ones are in Max's room, and it's 11 p.m., so he's sleeping. And there you are. That's your finished piece. You can fold it, check the tension. As you can see, this stretches quite a bit. And here's the one that Max has been using. With use, it'll settle and it'll become a little bit looser. And that's it. Whoa, there we go. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments.